50-year-old retired NYPD officer Salvatore Lopiccolo was working as an armed guard at a New York City Walgreens during the spring of 2023 when he spotted a known shoplifter trying to make off with something they hadn't paid for. Just 2 hours earlier, he had kicked the young man out of the store for taking some food, which he allowed the suspect to keep as long as he promised not to return. Lopiccolo sprang into action and confronted the accused thief at the entrance of the store, which is located inside the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan. While Lopiccolo attempted to grab the suspect's bag to look inside, however, the man swung it at the security guard's head, striking Lopiccolo in the face with a container of food. Undeterred by the alleged shoplifter's refusal to cooperate, Lopiccolo chased him out of the store and tackled him to the ground. The struggle continued until Port Authority and NYPD officers arrived at the scene and took over. Much to Lopiccolo's shock, the authorities were just as interested in prosecuting him. As the shoplifting suspect, he was cited for assault based on allegations that he had threatened and recklessly injured the accused thief's back. Lopiccolo fought back against the charge, accusing law enforcement of unjust arrest and retaliation. He claimed that the police had held him in a cell for more than 7 hours and charged him because he had expressed a desire for the theft suspect to receive mental treatment rather than face criminal prosecution. Due to the assault charge, Lopiccolo was required to surrender his gun until the case was resolved. He was therefore no longer able to work as an armed security guard, leaving him out of the job and without an income. During an interview with the New York Post, he announced his intentions to sue the Port Authority, but it's unclear whether he followed through with filing a case. Number 19. Collin Boucher-Gionet. 32-year-old mother of two, Nylah Frazier, was reported missing in Edmonton, Alberta, by her family in September 2024. Several days later, her murdered body was found on a rural property in neighboring Parkland County. At the time of her disappearance and death, Frazier had been trying to end her relationship with her abusive boyfriend, 34-year-old Collin Boucher-Gionet. Described in news reports as a repeat offender, he was on probation for threatening to kill his former foster mother. Boucher-Gionet has a history of family violence, volatile personal relationships, and anger problems. He also reportedly struggles with substance abuse, extreme jealousy, and deep trust issues with women. The day after Frazier's body was found, police issued a warrant for his arrest on charges of second-degree murder and indignity to a body. He was apprehended later that day, and for a short period of time, Frazier's family was able to rest easy knowing that the young woman's accused killer was behind bars. The relief was short-lived, however. In March of 2025, the family was devastated to learn that Boucher-Gionet had been released on bail after paying a mere $2,500 deposit. He was placed on 24-hour house arrest and was banned from consuming drugs or alcohol, owning a gun, or contacting 24 specific people. But these rules came as little comfort to Frazier's mother, Jody Dunn, who told CBC News that she felt uneasy about Boucher-Gionet's release. She was also about the decision, calling it a slap on the wrist and wondering out loud how it made sense to extend such leniency to someone who is accused of killing someone, especially given the defendant's criminal history. Boucher-Gionet has yet to enter a plea in the ongoing case. Number 18. Eugene Roebuck III. Shortly before 6 o'clock in the morning on September 3, 2022, a drunk driver collided with another vehicle along Highway 99 in Fresno, California, causing it to slam into a tree and killing its occupants. The intoxicated motorist, Eugene Roebuck III, had made an unsafe lane change at an extremely high speed and came into contact with the front end of the victim's car, sending both vehicles off the road and down an embankment. He was charged with multiple felonies for causing the deaths of the 20-year-old Mariano Cruz and his pregnant 18-year-old girlfriend, Emily Ochoa Asensio, including 2 counts of manslaughter and driving under the influence. Just minutes before the crash, Roebuck had been seen driving erratically at speeds of up to 115 miles per hour. Despite his obviously reckless behavior, he initially pleaded not guilty to the charges. He had a change of heart after striking a plea deal, however, and in 2024 he pleaded guilty to the manslaughter counts. Roebuck faced a maximum 12-year prison sentence, and the victim's loved one spent hours pleading with the judge, Charles Lee, to sentence him to the maximum, but Lee spared the defendant from prison time altogether, instead sentencing him to 12 years of probation. While announcing the decision, Lee stated, "There is no sentence this court can impose to make things right." He went on to say that Roebuck's punishment was in no way a reflection of the victims, but his words failed to comfort Cruz and Asensio's loved ones, who were visibly upset while leaving the courtroom. Number 17. Jeffery and Misty Scanlan.
Everywhere in the house. Does he have like, he doesn't hit his head on the walls or anything like that?
No.
Okay. How about the other children then that are supposed to be in school?
Yeah, they're upstairs.
You able to get them down here?
Yeah, he's
very strong.
He just turned 11, but he's super strong. Yeah, I mean, he's ripped off cabinets, kicked holes. His room upstairs, he kicked a hole all the way through into my bedroom.
Okay.
So he.
Okay.
So to keep him from destroying the house, we try to keep him in here.
He doesn't know to unlock?
No. Wow. Well, on this one, we had to tie this up. And then on the other door, we have a key lock.
Okay.
So.
Because I mean, some of them are very observant.
And
dude,
they
are smart in ways that we don't expect sometimes.
Oh, they're so sharp. Him and my daughter, they're both autistic. So
my concern as a safety officer is what happens in case of a fire.
Oh, that can be cut right there. It's just tied up. So that door opens right up. And the other one has a lock key.
So he could open it and yank it?
In April 2024, a truancy officer visited the Henderson, Nevada home of Jeffery Scanlan and Misty Scanlan, whose autistic son had been absent from school for over a week. No one answered the door, but the officer could hear a child screaming inside and other noises. Someone was clearly home. So the officer remained at the door and continued to knock. Finally, after 40 minutes, Jeffery came to the door. He explained that the children were sick and allowed the officer to come inside and check on the kids.
This morning?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not horrible. You got some sleep.
Yeah.
Even though the kids might have kept you awake some.
Yeah.
So I'm just here because they asked me to be here.
Okay.
Based on the situation, the kids haven't been in school. One of them is being homeschooled for the number of days that they haven't been in school.
Yeah.
So they got a few questions based on what they need to do as a school representative for truancy, okay?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It sounds like you got some challenges here at the house. Your wife and you have different, schedules to probably try to handle the kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's great. It sounds like you're trying the hardest you can to make the situation work, right? So, but they still have a job to do based on, their policies and.
Upon entering the family's living room, the officer immediately noticed a large, locked enclosure that was later described in a report as resembling a jail cell. Inside it was a young boy wearing only a diaper. The enclosure and its interior were caked in feces, prompting the officer to question the Scanlans about their cleaning habits. Misty explained that she hadn't cleaned the area in roughly 3 weeks because the family had been extremely busy. She and Jeffery said that they had the enclosure built not to keep their son captive, but for his own safety. While touring the rest of the house, the officer observed a trash-strewn bedroom with barely any furniture. Much like the cage, it was covered in feces. The door had a lock on the outside, which was clearly designed for keeping someone in the room. When questioned about it, the Scanlan said that they locked their escape artist autistic daughter in there. Furthermore, the couple explained that they duct taped the girl's shirts to her diapers in an effort to prevent her from sticking her hands into the garments after soiling them. While it's not unusual for parents to be overwhelmed, the Scanlans were questioned about why they hadn't reached out for the help that they so obviously needed. Jeffery said that they didn't know where to start and that he didn't want strangers in the family's home, but they were clearly incapable of managing the situation on their own, and investigators concluded that they had repeatedly put their kids in danger by failing to seek assistance. Jeffery and Misty were both arrested, and in January of 2025, they each pleaded guilty to one misdemeanor count of child neglect. Despite the shocking conditions that they had subjected their children to, they were sentenced to just a year of probation. While imposing the supervision, the judge explained that she had spared the couple from jail time because they were deemed to be at low risk for reoffending. Number 16. The murder of Christopher Branham. In June of 2020, 26-year-old Christopher Branham was beaten unconscious and robbed at a Red Roof Inn hotel in Round Rock, Texas. He was then taken to a Travis County cornfield and shot, execution style. The fatal attack was captured on video, but Branham's whereabouts remained a mystery until 37 days later, when his heavily decomposed body was found following an intensive search by his family and police. The victim's mother, Connie Branham, was devastated to learn that her son had pleaded for his life and to see his children during his final moments. And while his body was not immediately found, detectives very quickly identified 30-year-old Kyle Cleveland and 26-year-old Anthony Davis as the prime suspects in the case. Following the discovery of Branham's remains, prosecutors charged Cleveland and Davis with capital murder. Several additional defendants were charged with lower-level crimes, including Jamil Watford, and an unnamed female. According to prosecutors, Cleveland and Davis told others who were involved in the assault that they were going to drive Branham to the hospital. Instead, they drove him to the field where his body was later found and shot him in the back of the head. In October 2022, Davis and Cleveland and Watford took plea deals and admitted to reduced charges in exchange for lighter sentences. Cleveland, who fired the fatal gunshot, pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 35 years. Davis also pleaded guilty to murder and received a 14-year sentence, while Watford is serving 13 years for robbery. Connie Branham described the plea deals as a slap on the wrist. She and other family members believed the defendants would have faced heavier punishments if their cases had gone to trial. This belief was shared by Round Rock detective Patrick Turk, but prosecutors apparently felt differently and went ahead with the plea bargains despite the family's wishes. Number 15. Tyrese White. A New York teenager's attempt to sell a gun ended in his murder on May 6, 2021, when he was fatally shot by a man posing as an interested customer. 17-year-old Anthony Boyd Jr. had agreed to meet up with Tyrese White and Christopher Mills outside White's Mount Vernon home. When Boyd arrived at the designated location, Mills shot him in the chest and stole the gun he was trying to sell. Mills and White then fled the scene on foot, leaving Boyd behind to die on the pavement. Both suspects were charged with murder, and they both managed to avoid being convicted of the charge. In October 2024, Mills pleaded guilty to manslaughter in exchange for a 12-year prison sentence. White pleaded guilty to manslaughter the following month and was sentenced to 21 years in prison. To Boyd's mother, Yvonne, the sentences did not come close to reflecting the devastation that the defendants had caused to the victim's family. During a victim impact statement at White's sentencing hearing, she described how she had thought the United States would be a safe place to raise her son compared to the war zone in Liberia that she came from. Yvonne told White that he had taken the safety and security that she had come to America for and made it clear that she did not forgive the defendant. Boyd's father, Anthony Boyd Sr., took a slightly more approving stance, thanking the police for helping the family to achieve some measure of justice. He took the opportunity to voice his support for law enforcement, whom he credited for their efforts to reduce violence in America's cities. Number 14. Dean Harte. The older brother of former Boyzone singer Ronan Keating was killed in a deadly car crash in the Irish town of Swinford on July 15, 2023. 57-year-old Kieran Keating and his wife, Anna Marie, were driving to Sligo to attend their son's sports game when a driver in the opposite lane failed to negotiate a curve and drifted across the road. The vehicles collided head-on, and Keating was pronounced dead at the scene. Anna Marie survived with serious injuries and was unable to attend her husband's funeral. The driver of the car that hit the Keating's vehicle, 22-year-old Dean Harte, was suspected of driving distracted at the time of the crash. He denied being on his phone, which investigators had no way of disproving, and speed was ruled out as a factor. Harte was also thought to be sober when the accident occurred, with just a trace amount of marijuana in his system from days earlier. In early 2025, Harte pleaded guilty to careless driving, causing death, and received a 17-month suspended prison sentence. He was also banned from driving for 2 years. Keating's surviving family members were outraged by the lack of prison time. In an Instagram post expressing his disappointment, Ronan described the outcome of the case as a devastating example of the country's broken justice system. He noted how Harte had walked free after not even spending a single day behind bars and blamed this type of leniency for the alarming number of deadly car crashes that occur every week throughout Ireland. And while Ronan shamed Harte for his actions, he laid even heavier blame on everyone who participated in the process that led to the disappointing outcome. Number 13. Cooper Ashley. 18-year-old Dakota Wrightsman was shot dead in the basement of his family's Lee's Summit, Missouri home in May of 2023 while hanging out with 3 friends. He was just 8 days away from his high school graduation when his life was cut short. The shooter, 18-year-old Cooper Ashley, told police that he accidentally pulled the trigger while picking the gun up off the floor after it had fallen out of his pocket. He also claimed that he had thought the weapon was his airsoft gun. According to court documents, he had smoked marijuana and consumed alcohol prior to the shooting. Wrightsman's mother, Brandy, believed the shooting was deliberate due to the gun's 5 to 7 pound trigger pull. The victim's father, Aaron, told local station Fox 4 that he believed Ashley was aware of what he was doing, but that he didn't fully understand the repercussions of his actions. If the couple had known that one of the teens had a gun, they would have never let them inside the home, and the Wrightsman did not believe that their son knew about the gun. Ashley was charged with involuntary manslaughter. During the summer of 2024, the judge sentenced him to 5 years of probation and 4 months in jail. Less than 20 minutes later, however, the judge called everyone back into the courtroom and announced that he was reducing Ashley's sentence to 30 days of shock time. The change came as a disappointment to the Reitmans, but they were even more outraged when Ashley was released after spending just 5 days in custody. They contacted the prosecutor, who did not know why the judge had chosen to shorten Ashley's sentence, and the couple claimed that their attempts to reach the judge had been unsuccessful, leaving them without answers. Number 12. Nylah Frazier. While driving in West Hempstead, Long Island with 2 friends as passengers in October 2021, 19-year-old Nylah Frazier blew through a red light at over 100 miles per hour and crashed her BMW into a dump truck. Both of her friends, 19-year-old Curtis Caesar and 17-year-old Amanda Arguinzoni, died from injuries sustained during the accident, resulting in Frazier's arrest on charges of manslaughter and reckless endangerment. According to prosecutors, the wreck occurred shortly after an argument between Frazier and her boyfriend. Frazier was accused of speeding off in her SUV, presumably out of anger, and was charged with manslaughter and reckless endangerment. She initially pleaded not guilty but took a plea deal in early 2024 and admitted to 2 counts of manslaughter in exchange for a 3 to 9 year prison sentence. If Frazier had taken her case to trial, she would have faced up to 15 years behind bars in the event of a guilty verdict. The plea deal was met with intense disapproval from the victim's family members, some of whom could be heard sobbing in the courtroom while Frazier admitted her guilt. Despite their anger, however, several of Arguinzoni and Caesar's loved ones found it in their heart to forgive Frazier due to both their devout Christian values and for the sake of moving on. Number 11. Maria Wiley. 23-year-old Alicia Dean was brutally murdered in Cushing, Oklahoma, at the hands of someone nearly 10 years her junior in May of 2007. The killer, a troubled teenager named Maria Wiley, was related to Dean's fiancée and had been staying in the area for several months. But there were some issues and Dean threatened to call the police on Wiley, who had a history of substance abuse and running away from home. Wiley had been challenging Dean to hit her, but Dean had refused. She reacted to Dean's threat to call law enforcement by approaching her car and stabbing her repeatedly with a 4-inch blade. Dean exited her vehicle and collapsed onto the ground. She lost consciousness and died from her injuries, and Wiley was charged with her murder. Prosecutors originally planned to try Wiley as an adult, but she struck a plea deal and pleaded guilty as a juvenile to manslaughter, which meant that she would likely spend less than 5 years behind bars. Dean's mother, Sammy, told News on 6 that she would have liked to see Wiley go away for life so that she would never be able to harm another innocent victim. When questioned about why he was amenable to the plea agreement, the prosecutor explained that Wiley was likely to come across to the jury as a sympathetic figure. This heightened the risk of an acquittal, influencing his decision to negotiate a deal based on the philosophy that sometime was better than none. Number 10. Maimuna Baldeh. 27-year-old Dominic Adamic of Springwater, Ontario, died from blunt force injuries during the early morning hours of May 5th, 2018, when he was struck by a vehicle while walking along a roadside. He was walking home after a night out when the sheer impact of the collision literally knocked him out of his shoes. The driver, later identified as 35-year-old Maimuna Baldeh, fled the scene and failed to come forward despite the Adamic family's pleas for the person responsible for Dominic's death to do the right thing. They became so desperate to see the case solved that they even offered a $50,000 reward in exchange for information leading to the hit-and-run driver's arrest. Finally, 9 months after Adamic's death, police arrested Baldeh for failure to stop at an accident causing death. While searching her car, investigators found records showing that she had paid for $2,000 worth of bodywork 2 days after the crash. She claimed that her car had been vandalized, but authorities were unconvinced. Baldeh was found guilty as charged, following a 2-week jury trial in November 2023. In June of 2024, the judge sentenced her to 9 months of house arrest, followed by a year of probation. The judge explained that he did not believe Baldeh was guilty of causing Adamic's death, and that he was sentencing her based on her decision to flee the scene of the accident. He also said that he did not think there was anything the defendant could have done to save Adamic, even if she had stopped. And while Baldeh had denied knowing she had hit someone, the judge decided that there was no doubt she felt remorseful for her actions. The outcome of the case left Adamic's family feeling angry, frustrated, and failed by the system. Speaking with Collingwood today, Dominic's father Andrew wondered out loud what the point of investigative work even is if a judge is not going to adequately hold a defendant accountable. Number 9. Ryne San Hamel. 26-year-old Bobby Cann was cycling along a Chicago street in May of 2013 when a vehicle barreled into him at more than twice the speed limit. The driver, 32-year-old Ryne San Hamel, was going roughly 60 miles per hour when he struck Cann, severing the cyclist's leg and causing the rest of his body to land on the vehicle's roof. San Hamel proceeded to hit another vehicle, causing Cann to fall off his car and onto the pavement. Immediately following the crash, witnesses rushed over to render aid to Cann. He died from his injuries despite their best efforts, and responding officers soon discovered that San Hamel had been drinking. His blood alcohol content tested at twice the legal limit, and he had been arrested on 2 previous occasions for drinking and driving. Both of the past cases had been dismissed. Following Cann's death, San Hamel was charged with reckless homicide and aggravated DUI causing death. He pleaded guilty in 2017 and was sentenced to just 10 days in jail and 4 years of probation. Additionally, he was ordered to reimburse Cann's family $25,000 for funeral expenses. During his sentencing hearing, San Hamel tearfully expressed remorse and claimed that he did everything in his power to try saving Cann. He also described comforting Cann during his final moments while scooping blood out of his mouth. Cann's mother found the speech offensive and was disappointed by the sentence, which fell far short of the 3 to 14 years in prison that the defendant could have faced for the conviction. But the judge seemed to believe that San Hamel's remorse was genuine. About a month after the sentencing hearing, witnesses accused San Hamel of exaggerating the role he played in the efforts to save Cann's life. 2 people who were at the scene claimed that San Hamel did not play an active role in the life-saving attempts, but by then, the matter was considered a closed case. Number 8. Joel Hollendorfer. 19-year-old aspiring model Cara Nichols vanished after leaving her Colorado Springs home on October 9, 2012. She left her purse behind at her residence, ruling out the likelihood that she had traveled far or was planning to be away for long. Nichols' whereabouts remained a mystery for nearly a decade, despite investigators' extensive efforts to locate her. During that time, numerous theories were floated, including the possibility that Nichols had been abducted by organized criminals or had been lured into danger by someone who claimed they could help her advance her modeling career. In February 2022, the long-missing woman's remains were found on an El Paso County property where she had been buried on top of a horse grave. The property belonged to the parents of 47-year-old Joel Hollendorfer, who was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder following the discovery of Nichols' body. Hollendorfer claimed that he accidentally killed Nichols after hiring her as an escort. During his trial, the defense argued that Nichols had either died from a drug overdose or from being choked during intercourse. In 2023, Hollendorfer was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 24 years in prison. Nichols' family had been hoping for a murder conviction and a longer sentence, preferably life in prison. And the lighter outcome left the slain woman's mother feeling as though her daughter's life didn't matter to the people involved in the justice-seeking process. Number 7. Matthew Garcia. 20-year-old Marcos Sanders was fatally gunned down outside a San Antonio apartment complex following a botched drug deal in 2009. He and 2 friends had been trying to buy drugs from Matthew Gabriel Garcia when some sort of conflict broke out, prompting Sanders to get in his car and leave. Garcia opened fire on his vehicle as he was pulling away, causing Sanders to crash the car after being shot. When questioned by police, Garcia claimed that he had acted in self-defense after Sanders tried to beat him up. In early 2013, he pleaded no contest to murder and assault charges as part of an agreement with prosecutors. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, which was considerably less than the 40-year term he could have faced if convicted at trial. The verdict and punishment angered the victim's stepmother, Carol Sanders, who claimed that the plea deal was negotiated behind closed doors and without the family's involvement. She seemed especially exasperated after waiting for 4 years for the case to go to trial, only to learn that that would never happen. Number 6. Rogel Aguilera-Mederos. Cuban-American truck driver Rogel Aguilera-Mederos immigrated to the United States for better opportunities, only to face a potential lifetime behind bars after unintentionally causing a deadly car accident in Colorado. The 23-year-old lost control of his brakes while traveling downhill during rush hour, resulting in a 28-vehicle pileup that left 4 people dead and many others injured. Prosecutors accused Aguilera-Mederos of speeding and driving past several emergency pull-offs that they thought he could have used to avoid a wreck, but the young blue-collar worker insisted that his truck had malfunctioned. He had no drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of the crash and had no prior criminal history. Above all, Aguilera-Mederos did not mean to hurt anyone, but his tearful apology and pleas for forgiveness were no match for the state's minimum sentencing guidelines, which called for a 110-year prison sentence for the 27 charges that he was convicted of. Civilians and the trucking community rallied around Aguilera-Mederos and called on the government to reduce his sentence, which many believed was far too harsh. Truckers united in a boycott to show their support for the man, and even the prosecutor, whose job often involves fighting to put a suspect behind bars for as long as possible, sought a reduced sentence. In late 2021, Colorado Governor Jared Polis acknowledged that Mederos' sentence was unjust and reduced it to 10 years, less than 1/10 of the time he was originally facing. He'll become eligible for parole in 2026. Number 5. Malcolm Benson. 50-year-old convicted killer Malcolm Benson was released from prison early due to good behavior after serving 19 years on a second-degree murder conviction. He re-entered the free world in January 2015 but was accused of killing again just 9 months later. In September of that year, Benson fatally shot 59-year-old Army veteran Stanley Carter at a bus stop during a robbery gone wrong. Witnesses said that there was no prior argument or discussion between the two men and that Benson opened fire on the victim in an unprovoked fashion. He proceeded to assault a female victim nearby, and in April of 2016 he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. If Benson had served his first murder sentence under Michigan's current sentencing guidelines, he would have still been in prison at the time of Carter's death, which would have therefore been prevented. Under the phased-out guidelines that he was sentenced under the first time, he had an opportunity to shave a much bigger chunk of his prison term than modern policy allows. Number 4. Lawrence Bierton. British career criminal Lawrence Bierton was first convicted of murder during the 1990s when he was found guilty of killing 2 elderly sisters. He was sentenced to life in prison, but was released in 2020 at the age of 60 after satisfying his minimum required term. In November 2021, Bierton bludgeoned 73-year-old Pauline Quinn to death with her coffee table at her home in Worksop after she refused to give him money. He was both drunk and high at the time of the killing, and he attempted to use his substance abuse problem as the basis for reduced culpability in court. Bierton argued that he was not guilty of murder based on diminished responsibility, claiming that his addiction constituted a mental abnormality. In December 2023, he was found guilty as charged for killing Quinn, whose violent death bore eerie similarities to the double homicide Bierton had committed nearly 30 years earlier. The judge imposed a whole life order, making him one of just a few dozen British killers who will never have an opportunity at seeing freedom again. Number 3. Edmund Deegan. 33-year-old Yelene Kennedy and her 23-year-old sister, Lily Kennedy, were shot to death at Yelene's Houston, Texas home in 1984. Autopsy findings reveal that Lily had been killed quickly with a gunshot wound to the back of the head. Yelene had suffered a much slower death at the hands of the killer, who had bludgeoned, stabbed, and assaulted her before shooting her and ransacking the property. Despite their best efforts, detectives were unable to come up with any solid leads. The case went cold and stayed that way, even as DNA technology advanced. Just when it seemed like the murders might never be solved, a surprise witness identified a man named Edmund Deegan as the killer in 2014. Investigators were able to connect Deegan to the case through forensic evidence, and in January 2015, he was charged in connection with Yelene Kennedy's murder. He was convicted in 2017 and was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but served just a mere portion of his term due to a legal loophole requiring authorities to adhere to the sentencing guidelines that were in place when the Kennedy sisters were killed. Under these outdated laws, which were designed to reduce prison overcrowding, Deegan became eligible for release in December 2021. As a condition of his parole, he's banned from entering Harris County until 2030. But this does not qualify as due justice in the eyes of the victim's family, who were appalled that a killer could get away with serving such little prison time. Today's topic was requested by Jordan Harris 6801, Kimmy Matt 5528, and Nikki 123BXD. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Kenneth Twyman. 26-year-old Kenneth Twyman was barely an adult when he landed on Wisconsin's most wanted list for the first time in 2018. He made the list 2 more times over the years, while repeatedly managing to evade law enforcement despite his periodic arrests on extremely serious charges. But the repeat felon's days of ripping and running are over for at least the next few decades, while he serves prison time for the lengthy list of charges he accumulated during his time on the run. In March of 2023, Twyman was convicted of reckless homicide in the shooting death of 24-year-old father of 8 Tavon Luckett, who was killed over a drug and money-related dispute. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison, followed by 15 years of supervision. Later that year, Luckett pleaded guilty to federal charges of dealing cocaine, marijuana, and heroin, while armed with a machine gun, marijuana possession, and making a false statement to a gun dealer. He was sentenced to 10 years to be served concurrently with his state term. If you've not yet seen our release about when police brutality goes wrong, then be sure to stick around after number 1, because that's coming right up. Number 1. Hissa Abed. The ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict has left many people deeply divided and at odds with one another due to conflicting loyalties, but regardless of what side someone is on, people generally agree that it's not okay to touch someone else's property or intrude on an individual's personal space. An 18-year-old Canadian woman named Hissa Abed was accused of violating this boundary in August of 2024 when she grabbed an Israeli flag belonging to 88-year-old Joel Sack. During a peaceful demonstration in Toronto, Abed had tried to yank several flags out of people's hands while riding past a rally with her family, and eventually succeeded in stealing Sack's flag, knocking him to the ground in the process. The senior citizen reportedly suffered long-term injuries due to the assault, and Abed was charged with assault and theft as part of a plea deal that Sack described as a slap on the wrist. The young woman agreed to plead guilty to a reduced charge of mischief under $5,000. The judge sentenced her to a year of probation and ordered her to undergo anger management classes. Abed must also complete 40 hours of community service, and if she completes her probation requirements and doesn't violate, she'll avoid a permanent criminal conviction. Sack was deeply upset by the terms of the plea deal. He made his feelings known in a victim impact statement, questioning what he had done to make the defendant so angry that she resorted to physical aggression. Shocking surveillance footage captured the moment 31-year-old police constable Alex Dunn slammed the woman face first to the floor of an arrest processing facility in Calgary, Canada. The ordeal unfolded on the night of December the 13th of 2017. After 26-year-old Dahlia Caffey had been arrested by Dunn for breaching her court-imposed curfew. Dunn took Caffey to the facility where he tried to remove a scarf from her head before taking her mugshot. A brief struggle ensued, during which the constable hurled the handcuffed woman to the ground in one swift motion. The footage showed Caffey's head bouncing off the ground as blood splattered on the floor. Caffey was taken to a hospital where she underwent surgery for an injured lip and a broken nose. Consequently, Dunn was charged with assault causing bodily harm. He wasn't fired from the force, but was placed in an administrative role. Footage of the assault went viral on social media when the video was made public in October of 2020. During Dunn's trial in the same month, Staff Sergeant Gordon MacDonald testified that his colleagues' actions were the worst use of force he'd seen in his 30-year career, and said he could hear the woman's bones crack as her face struck the ground. MacDonald added that Caffey had been complaining about being arrested but was in no way threatening or aggressive toward any of the officers. In the end, Dunn was found guilty of assault causing bodily harm. In June of 2021, just days before Dunn received a 30-day conditional sentence that included house arrest, Caffey died of a suspected overdose. 5 months later, Dunn appealed to a court of King's Bench, but a judge upheld his conviction. The judge ruled that even if the judge believed Dunn's testimony, all that was needed to convict the officer was the video of the assault. Number 9. Brandon Myers. 25-year-old Georgia law enforcement officer Brandon Myers was fired after using excessive force while arresting Roderick Walker, aged 26, beating him and pinning him to the ground. The incident took place on September the 11th of 2020 outside the Georgia Department of Public Health in Clayton County. Myers and another Clayton County deputy by the name of Dakota Riddick spotted a vehicle with a broken tail light and subsequently pulled it over. The occupants of the vehicle were Walker, his girlfriend, their 5-month-old child, and his stepson. The deputies approached the vehicle and asked Walker, who was in the passenger seat, for his ID. Walker said he didn't have one and questioned why they needed it, since he wasn't the one driving. The deputies then demanded that Walker get out of the vehicle too. When he did, the deputies threw him to the ground as they struggled to handcuff him. A cell phone video captured by a witness showed Walker pleading with the officers and saying, "I'm gonna die.
I'm gonna die. I can't breathe. The video, which also showed Myers repeatedly punching Walker, was widely shared on social media. The man suffered numerous injuries in the incident, resulting in neurological issues. He received medical attention and eventually recovered. In the wake of the incident, Myers was fired from the department and Riddick resigned. A Clayton County grand jury declined to charge Walker in the case except for a seatbelt violation. In August of 2021, Myers was indicted on charges of battery and violating the oath of office. The following year, he pleaded guilty to the second charge. As part of the plea deal, Myers was sentenced under Georgia's First Offender Act to 5 years of probation and 100 hours of community service, as well as a $1,000 fine. It was unclear if Riddick was facing charges. Number 8. Daniel Auderer. In the wake of Washington woman Jahnavi Kandula's death, Seattle police officer Daniel Auderer was caught on his body-worn camera, callously joking about the ordeal, noting that the victim's life had limited value. Kandula, who was a 23-year-old graduate student from India, was crossing the street on the night of January the 23rd of 2023 when she was struck and killed by a police vehicle rushing to the area in response to an emergency call. The officer behind the wheel, Kevin Dave, hadn't activated his siren continuously. He was driving 74 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone, with the cruiser's lights flashing when he fatally hit Kandula, throwing her 138 feet away from where she stood. Auderer was called to the scene of the crash to determine if Dave had been impaired. He conducted a sobriety test on Dave, after which he eventually got back into his cruiser and continued with his shift. Upon doing so, he forgot to turn off his body-worn camera. So when he called another officer, their entire conversation was inadvertently recorded. But she is dead, Auderer could be heard talking on the phone, before laughing at the inaudible reply of his fellow officer. Auderer added, "Yeah, just write a check," before chuckling some more.
I think she went up on the hood, hit the windshield, then when he hit the brakes, flew off the car. But she is dead. Yeah, look, $11,000. She was 26 anyway. She had limited value.
The callous comments were discovered by officials who were reviewing the footage of the crash that took Kandula's life. They were flagged to a police department lawyer, prompting Seattle's Office of Police Accountability to launch an investigation. The Seattle Police Officers Guild, which is a police labor union, claimed the conversation was taken out of context and that the officers involved had only mocked how the city's lawyers would approach the case in an attempt to minimize liability. The latest updates indicated that Auderer was administratively reassigned to a non-operational position. As for Dave, the King County Prosecutor's Office would have a collision reconstruction firm look over the video and case material to provide a third-party analysis. This will help inform the prosecutor's office in deciding if Dave would face charges or not. Number 7. Sean McKnight and Kevin Robinson. Two police officers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, were arrested after allegations that they'd brutally beaten a man with their fists and batons on March the 29th of 2013. At around 10 p.m., officers Sean McKnight and Kevin Robinson spotted a man on a motor scooter, ignoring a stop sign at 7th and Somerset Streets. The officers, who were in a cruiser, gave chase. At the next block, they pulled over the suspect, identified as 21-year-old Najee Rivera. McKnight and Robinson got out of their car with their batons extended, telling Rivera, "Come here." Apparently, Rivera got scared and fled. However, the officers caught up after a brief chase. According to police reports filed by McKnight and Robinson, Rivera then lost control of his scooter and fell to the ground. McKnight and Robinson stated that when they tried to arrest Rivera, he grabbed one of the officers and threw him into a brick wall before repeatedly elbowing him in the face. The officers fought back and battered Rivera. The onslaught left Rivera with a fractured skull, cuts to his face, and needing emergency hospitalization. Rivera was accused of aggravated assault and resisting arrest. but prosecutors dropped their charges against him after new evidence came to light. Rivera's girlfriend had canvassed businesses near the scene of the crime and obtained a surveillance video of what had really happened on the night in question. District Attorney Seth Williams said that the video undermined every aspect of the officer's account of the incident. Williams added that McKnight and Robinson had falsified police reports. Rivera was cleared of all charges and was awarded a $200,000 settlement by the city of Philadelphia after a federal lawsuit was filed on his behalf. The officers were charged with aggravated assault, criminal conspiracy, and filing false reports, and were facing a 30-day suspension, which would later lead to their dismissal from the force. In February of 2015, McKnight and Robinson, aged 30 and 26 respectively, surrendered to authorities. Sadly, Rivera was killed in an unrelated incident 10 months later. He was shot after getting involved in a street fight. In April of 2016, McKnight and Robinson testified in their defense at their jury trial. They claimed that they'd stopped Rivera because their supervisors had warned them to watch for young men on motorbikes and ATVs, which were used by local drug gangs to ferry drugs and guns at the time. The defense lawyers told the jury that the officers used only the force needed to subdue Rivera and had not touched him after he stopped resisting and was cuffed. The jury ultimately acquitted McKnight and Robinson. Reportedly, the biggest weakness in the prosecution's case was Rivera's death. Number 6. Daniel Andrew. California Highway Patrol Officer Daniel Andrew was accused of beating a woman walking along Interstate 10 in Los Angeles. The incident took place on July the 1st of 2014, when Marlene Pinnock was walking barefoot on the freeway near the La Brea Avenue on-ramp. When CHP officer Daniel Andrew spotted the 51-year-old, he approached her, tackled her to the ground on the roadside shoulder, and began pummeling her in the face following the violent confrontation. Pinnock was hospitalized and placed on a mental health hold. She suffered from bipolar disorder and had been off her medication at the time, said Pinnock's attorney. The harrowing incident, which was caught on cell phone video by a passerby, caused controversy and outrage after it went viral online. The CHP said that Andrew had tried to prevent Pinnock from running into traffic lanes. In the aftermath, Andrew was forced to resign, and the CHP agreed to pay $1.5 million to settle a civil rights lawsuit brought by Pinnock. Andrew wasn't facing charges after the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office decided there wasn't enough evidence to prove Andrew had used unreasonable force. Number 5. Chester Police Sergeant. A Pennsylvania police sergeant was under investigation after a video caught him hitting a woman in the face with a stun gun on March the 16th of 2019. Chester police had been called to the 800 block of East 16th Street at around 5 p.m. on reports of a riot, which had stemmed from partygoers having been turned away from a nearby house party. Responding officers arrived to find several people fighting in the street. As a police sergeant tried to intervene, 20-year-old Dominique DeFiore allegedly struck him. A glimpse of the incident was caught on cell phone video, which only showed the sergeant striking DeFiore. Once the woman fell to the ground, the officer also used a taser on her. According to witnesses, a man who was in the area said he thought the officer's conduct was a clear example of excessive police force. In the end, 4 people, including DeFiore, were arrested and charged with aggravated assault and alcohol-related offenses. The Chester police chief said in a statement that the video and the level of force used in connection with the incident were all being investigated. However, updates on the investigation were never made clear. Number 4. Spencer Muniz-Bottomley. Police brutality! A California man was recorded yelling as he witnessed Vallejo police officer Spencer Muniz-Bottomley brutally beating an unarmed suspect on March the 10th of 2017. Police were called to the Valero gas station on Fairgrounds Drive after 23-year-old Vacaville resident DeJohn Hall was frightening employees. The owner of the gas station told KGO-TV that Hall had tried to make a purchase. However, when his credit card was declined, the man lost his temper and began pointing his fingers at employees like he had a gun while shouting, "I'm God! I'm God!" Muniz-Bottomley, who was the first responding officer, confronted Hall, who consequently fled and ran across the road. A cell phone video from a witness captured the officer briefly giving chase before Hall sat down on the median. At that point, Muniz-Bottomley mounted Hall and began punching and hitting the man with a flashlight. A crowd of onlookers surged toward Muniz-Bottomley and Hall, telling the former to stop. Muniz-Bottomley told the crowd to shut up and get back. At one point, he even threatened onlookers with his gun, pulling it out of his holster and pointing it in the direction of witnesses before putting it back in his holster. A second officer subsequently arrived and placed his knee on Hall in an attempt to subdue him. Meanwhile, Muniz-Bottomley continued to strike Hall, while additional officers arrived at the scene and commanded the crowd to back up. Hall was later booked on suspicion of being under the influence of a controlled substance, resisting arrest, resisting or threatening an officer with force, and a probation violation. The aforementioned charges were merged with other charges that the suspect had been previously accused of. The footage of the ordeal was posted online, gaining millions of views. In October of 2018, Muniz-Bottomley was fired from the department. The reason for his departure wasn't clearly stated, but he was named in several other lawsuits alleging that he'd used excessive force during arrests. While Hall was in county jail awaiting trial, an Oakland-based civil rights attorney filed a claim with the city of Vallejo on behalf of Hall. The claim was for substantial injuries Hall had sustained to his body, face, and head, causing him short-term memory loss. Hall ultimately received $75,000 as a settlement from the city. It never became clear what penalties he received for his criminal charges, if any. Number 3. Black Lives Matter demonstration. Florida woman Latoya Ratliff sued the city of Fort Lauderdale and its police department after a police officer hit her skull with a rubber bullet at a Black Lives Matter protest on May the 31st of 2020. Ratliff had marched in a demonstration which was calling for police reform in the wake of the death of a black man at the hands of the police. According to Ratliff, the demonstration started very peaceful and positive, but for some reason it transitioned into police officers tear gassing protesters. She said that as the smoke in the streets grew thick, she decided to go home. However, before the 34-year-old could get to her car, she was hit in the face with a 40mm kinetic impact projectile, which consisted of a plastic body and a crushable foam nose. Ratliff's eye socket was immediately shattered as she collapsed to the ground, bleeding profusely. The woman was left temporarily paralyzed and her face was so swollen that she was barely recognizable. Several individuals corralled her into safety before taking her to the hospital, where she was treated for severe facial injuries that required multiple stitches. The police department conducted an investigation and identified police detective Eliza Ramos as the one who had fired the rubber bullet. Ramos claimed that during the incident he was aiming at a man who'd thrown a tear gas canister back at officers. He added that the victim had entered into his line of fire as he launched the projectile. The officer was eventually cleared of wrongdoing. In mid-2022, Ratliff filed a civil rights lawsuit against the city and the police department, alleging that her First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments had been violated. She also sought unspecified monetary damages. Ramos and his superiors requested to invoke qualified immunity, which could protect officers from civil claims. However, a judge denied the request. As of the latest updates, a jury trial in the case had been tentatively set for January of 2024. Number 2. Todd Stanley. After pummeling an Ohio woman in the face over a slice of cheese on January the 16th of 2023, Butler Township Police Sergeant Todd Stanley was charged with misdemeanor assault. On the day in question, the 52-year-old, along with Officer Tim Zellers, were called to a McDonald's branch. Customer Latinka Hancock had gotten into a dispute with an employee. after she'd paid to have extra cheese on her burger, but the sandwich allegedly came without it. Staff requested the responding officers to issue a trespass notice to Hancock. Stanley and Zellers repeatedly asked the woman to identify herself, but according to the responding officers, became belligerent, raising her voice and saying, "If you arrest me, I promise you're going to have a problem." The situation quickly escalated, and when Zellers told Hancock she was under arrest, a struggle ensued. Cell phone and police body cam footage showed Stanley repeatedly hitting Hancock, even hitting her in the face. Hancock suffered a busted lip, loose teeth, a closed head injury, and a back injury. The 31-year-old was eventually taken into custody on charges of resisting arrest and failing to identify. She also received citations for driving under suspension and having an open container of alcohol in a vehicle. In the immediate aftermath, Stanley was put on administrative leave amid the charges he was facing. He later retired in May. 4 months later, he was convicted of assault and sentenced to 2 years of probation. The man was fined $500 and ordered to undergo a 60-day monitoring program. Additionally, he was required to continue mental health treatment and to pay reasonable expenses to Hancock for treatment resulting from the assault. Number 1. Police officers from Wildwood, New Jersey. Emily Weinman, who was punched and arrested by local police in Wildwood, New Jersey during a confrontation over alleged underage drinking, was awarded $325,000 as a settlement after she sued the city. The 20-year-old from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was at a Wildwood beach on May the 26th of 2018 with her 18-month-old daughter, her friend, and her aunt. Police officers Thomas Cannon and Robert Jordan approached Weinman after seeing 2 unopened cans of alcoholic beverages lying against a cooler. The officers demanded she take a breathalyzer. Weinman told officers that she hadn't consumed any alcohol, but she still obliged and took the test, which came back negative. Weinman explained that the beverages belonged to her aunt, who was returning shortly, and suggested that the officers wait for her arrival. She and the officers began to argue over whether there were any laws broken. When Officer Cannon asked for her last name, Weinman refused to provide it, at which point a verbal altercation ensued between the two. Cannon told Weinman that she was causing a scene and told her he'd give her one more chance to give her last name. Weinman said that they didn't need her last name. "Okay, that's it," the officer says. "I'm done with you," and asked his partner if he had handcuffs on him. Upon hearing this, Weinman reacted angrily and began to walk away. Police body camera footage showed the officer telling her, "That's it, you're about to get dropped." Weinman then turned around and appeared to push the officer in the chest. The officer grabbed Weinman's hair and took her to the ground. Weinman in turn could be heard yelling, "You're not allowed to beat me like that," as officers Cannon and Jordan were attempting to detain her. A cell phone video from a bystander captured one of the officers striking Weinman in the face and head with closed fists. Weinman was arrested on several charges, including aggravated assault, resisting arrest, obstruction, and disorderly conduct, among others. She ultimately pleaded guilty to one charge of disorderly conduct in February of 2019 and was sentenced to 1 year of probation. Weinman and her legal team later filed a federal lawsuit alleging that she'd been assaulted without justification. The lawsuit also asserted that the officers had arrested Weinman by forcefully pushing her face and head into the sand, pulling her hair, twisting her arms, placing their full body weight on her, choking her, and eventually striking her. It also accused the Wildwood Police Department of using force at a high rate. The suit further stated that the incident had left Weinman suffering from emotional and physical injuries. Weinman eventually reached a settlement with the city and received over $325,000 in compensation over her complaints about excessive force being used against her.
Thanks for watching. If you had the power to abolish presidential pardons in the USA, regardless of the political party in power, would you choose to do so? Why or why not? Share your thoughts in the comments section below.